and we are straight up 11 o'clock on the hour, at least here in San Diego. So I want to say welcome, everybody. This is the Mylio Photos coffee break, and we're really glad you're able to join us today. We have a special guest with us. We have Jordan Babeon from SurroundUs Services. And what they do is help people manage their clutter. So they work with Mylio Photos as well and help people who have made a giant mess of things get into an orderly space. So if you're someone who's looking for someone to hold your hand and get through the worst of that and to help you get organized, their company does a great job at that kind of thing. And they use Mylio Photos as part of that process. So if you're already in using Mylio Photos, they can definitely give you some good pointers. Today's presentation is going to be focusing in on how to handle decluttering your digital life. And that's something that I think is really important for all of us. I mean, I can look through my own system that I think is fairly well organized, and it's still a bit of a mess. And I've helped a lot of other people get to a better point with theirs, but I'm really looking forward to hearing the tips that they're going to share with us today. So hopefully we can all improve our workflows with our digital images, videos, documents, and keep things from getting out of control. So welcome, Jordan. We also have a couple of people here from Jordan's team. We have Raven and Hannah. They're going to be helping out in the chat. So as you have questions, please pop them into the chat or feel free to unmute. As we go through the presentation, I'm going to try to keep everyone's mics muted except for Jordan's. However, please feel free to unmute your ask your questions. It's just to keep the background noise to a minimum. So with that, I want to go ahead and turn the floor over to Jordan, and thank you for being here.
Great. Thank you, Angela. That was such a warm introduction. I'm super excited to be here. This is one of my favorite topics. And so let's go ahead and get started. I am going to bring up a presentation that I'm going to share with you. And so let me get that loaded. Okay. Yeah, so like Angela said, I mean, what I'm planning on talking to you all about today is really sharing some general tips about decluttering your digital life. And this is, you know, maybe one thing that I would just change slightly, Angela, with what you said is, in my opinion, this is now just a new experience that we all have to deal with. I mean, this isn't something that, oh, I did something wrong and now I have a cluttered digital life. It's just the nature of how technology has evolved, you know, over the past, 20, 30 years that has resulted in us all managing and dealing with a lot of digital clutter. So what I hope to do is share with you guys, you know, some tips, some tricks, some tools to help you, you know, manage all of that. And when we talk about digital clutter, we're certainly going to talk about our photos. That's typically, you know, one of the most important components of our digital lives that we're concerned about, and certainly what we work closely with Mylio on managing. But this also applies to, you know, digital files that you might have in various cloud sites like Google Drive or Dropbox, or your computer, or maybe an old computer. Your passwords, you know, we're all managing so many passwords anymore. NFTs, you know, which are like digital representations of art. Some of us are collecting those now, and just data in general. So, you know, there's a whole new world out there that all of a sudden, you know, we have to manage, and that's what we're really here to help support you with. So, a little bit about my background and kind of what, you know, brought me to this kind of, you know, part of the world. I started the company SurroundUs in 2018. We're a small business located here in the Boulder, Colorado area. And before I started that company, I was fortunate enough to work with some pretty large software companies, NetSuite and Oracle. I was responsible for a professional services team that delivered software implementations and helped businesses with all of their technology and data migration. And I did that for the first half of my career. And so I'm very adept at software and working with data. But as I grew older and had a family of my own, I realized that, I really was a sucker for kind of the digital legacy, the photos and all of these kind of more personal aspects of our digital life. And I felt very strongly that it wasn't just the businesses that needed our support anymore. It was really you and I, that we were dealing with as much as these small businesses were. So I jumped ship and started the company. And last year, actually, we were just named one of the global leaders in this emerging industry. So I'm super excited, to have Raven and Hannah and the rest of our team on board. And we really are trying to kind of, pave the way here and help us figure out how to do this. So I'd like to get warmed up today by starting off with a few questions. So I'm curious if any of these are going to resonate with you. They certainly resonate with us. So if they do, we'd love for you guys to drop us an emoji, in the chat, or, give us a little hand raise or anything, fun, so we know you're listening and these are resonating. So the first one is, you took a photo on your phone and you want to share it with a friend or family member. And now you're on your Mylio Photos desktop app, on your computer there, and you cannot find it. Mylio, by the way, is one of the great systems that makes that sync pretty easy. But even with that being said, we hear from a lot of people, like, I still can't find it. And it's just due to the sheer volume of photos that we're taking. We're not taking one photo or a series of 24 exposures. We're taking, 24 of the same shot to get the very best one. Again, it's just how different, technology is for us today. So how about the next question? So you want to turn last year's family photos into framed prints, but it's just taking you too long to locate them or, find the one, the photo file that you really want to print out. So we call that curating a collection, where you go through, a bunch of versions and you're selecting out a few to print. And I can't see the chat window. So Raven, are we getting some acknowledgement there?
It's pretty quiet right now. I think you're going to have to warm people up a little bit.
Try harder here. Okay.
There was one person who gave a thumbs up to the last one. So
okay. Okay, that's fair. All right. How about let's do the last one here. An important birthday is coming up. This is one of my favorite ones. I'm kind of known as like the token slideshow person in my world. So somebody's having a big, their 50th birthday is coming up, maybe a really big anniversary, something like that. And you want to do something special with your photos, but you're not even sure where to start it. In fact, one of my very best friends went through this, and she's very organized, and her parents just had their 50th wedding anniversary, and we had her all geared up. And even though she was super organized, the day after their party, she was like, I still didn't get that slideshow done because it was just so overwhelming. I just didn't even know where to start. I mean, this is unfortunate because we have all these tools. But you guys, this is just how it is, right? I mean, we can't be the only ones. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to these. But don't worry, we've got some solutions for you, and we've got some good tips and tricks that can help you guys kind of whittle down your collections and maybe make some of these a little bit easier. Any other fun scenarios that anyone wants to share? Just jump in, Raven. Feel free to interrupt me if you need to. So let's get started and really talk about how we do this. Why declutter your digital life? There's a lot of reasons to, and you might be thinking, like, why go through this massive undertaking? And the main reason, I would say one of the main reasons is really to talk about, I think that it's important when it comes to your memories specifically to focus on quality over quantity. And that shift has been flip-flopped over the past, decade or two. And there's a lot of reasons that I think that's a problem. There's environmental reasons, just the cost of storing your data at such a high volume. There's environmental costs, there's financial costs that have to do that. It's a lot to manage. There's hardware costs, your devices that you're going to have to manage. But there's also just the mental clutter and space that takes up in your brain. It's really hard to, I have young kids, and we talk a lot about how it's really hard for them to enjoy the toys that they have when they accumulate so many. They don't even know what they have. I think that's very, very similar to how we interact with our photos and our files. You can't enjoy those really precious memories if they're, buried thousands and thousands deep in a bunch of other ones that maybe aren't as precious. So one of the big reasons that we encourage you to consider this is focusing on quality, not quantity. To give you an idea of the volume of photos that we deal with, that we encounter, it's far more than a few thousand. On average, when we work with clients, we're seeing 70 to 90,000 photos once we consolidate them from all of their different sources. So pull them from old computers, from old phones, from their spouses or partners' phones, from their various, different places, old CDs, hard drives, all the places that these photos are coming. Let's just pause for a minute and consider how much that is. 90,000 of something. It's a lot. And not only is it a lot, that's the average. We see people with hundreds of thousands and 1 million plus all day long. I'm stopping because that is crazy. You guys, that is crazy. And even just figuring out how much you have can be challenging. Raven's nodding because she does this for me. And when we take on a new client and do this for them, she has to go through, and one of the first things that she has to do is figure out how many total files that they have. And it takes time, and it's a process in and of itself. Okay. So not only is the sheer volume of that overwhelming, and prevents you from really enjoying and doing the, using these for what their purpose is, which is adding to your life. Was there a question?
No, we just had somebody log in that wasn't muted. I took care of it.
No,
Sorry.
no problem. No problem. But what also happens is we see a ton of duplicates in those scenarios. Okay. So you backed it up once, you backed it up a second time, you didn't want to lose it. It was really important. You backed it up another time. And now you have multiple, batches of that. And, we have systems like Mylio that can help us vet out those duplicates, but even just getting them into one place. So it creates a lot of extra work for you. We talked a little bit about reducing carbon footprint. And then we talked about earlier when we asked those questions is, how difficult does having this volume make using and enjoying your photos, putting together albums, putting together, whether those are virtual or physical albums, photo books, there's a huge resurgence in printing out your photos and creating books and items and things like that, that kind of fall into this photo art world, because I think we miss that. We miss having, we miss having our photos around us. That's kind of our namesake, like surround us with your memories again. We're not the only ones missing that. And it's challenging when you're not decluttered. So those are our big whys. There's many more, but in the interest of kind of our time together, I think we'll leave it there. I want to do a fun little activity here, kind of on this same thread, and see now. So I'm hoping everyone's going to participate. If you want to chat into this, you can also hold up like A, B, or C, sign language style, or 1, 2, 3 if you're not comfortable with the chat features. But I want you to try and take your best guess at, once you curate a collection, like let's say you got everything in one place, you removed, all of the duplicates, what percentage of your photos would you actually end up keeping on average? This is actual data, we have from operating over the past 3 years, and it always kind of shocks me. So take a minute, think about it. If anybody has any questions on what I'm meaning in this question, jump in. After curating, do you think that the average client would keep half, 55% of their photos, 13%, so get rid of, almost 90% of it, or a little less than a quarter at 22%? What do you guys think?
Well, the answers coming into the chat are pretty heavily towards A and B. There's been a couple of C's.
Yeah, I only see one C.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
My leaning is also to A, but that's me. I can't imagine getting rid of half of my photos.
I know, right? It's kind of shocking thinking like, how would I get rid of half of my photos? Okay, last chance. If anybody wants to jump in with a vote, I'm going to reveal the answer. So the answer is actually C. On average, we find that most of our clients are only keeping 20% of their photos. That's
incredible.
Yeah, it is incredible. And I think it's a real testament to what's possible here. And next time, you're scrolling through your photos, maybe think about that, consider, what do I really need? How many times am I really going to go through that? What we find is that our photo collections are very rarely all photos. And so some of the tips that we're going to recommend today are, one of them, which is my favorite, I think it's actually towards the end of the presentation, is how to keep some of that out of our photo collections, what we call kind of non-images. So we'll get to that. But the first thing that we want to recommend to you guys is that you commit to a scheduled check-in. This is kind of your tip number one. And I cannot stress the importance of this enough. For many of us, including myself, if this is not literally on my calendar, it doesn't exist. Being a busy mom and a business owner, I live and I die by my calendar. And so I have to block this off on my calendar, and I set it up as a recurring event that says photo maintenance. We have a lot of people who we do this on behalf of them, as well, but figure out what works for you and commit to a scheduled check-in. Monthly is great. It's a really great cadence. That way, if you go on like a nice vacation or something, you don't get too far behind. If you can't do monthly and you want to do quarterly, just know you're going to need a little bit more time. If you start pushing it out past quarterly, we find out that it kind of just like slips off and just goes away, and you just kind of don't end up doing it. Some people do it weekly or bi-weekly. So find out your cadence that's going to work with your schedule. And I believe we have a freebie on this that is our checklist, like our photo checklist, right, Hannah, that we can maybe pass out, but it talks a little bit about, kind of, what are some of these options. So, I know that just kind of saying, hey, once a month, make sure that your photos aren't cluttered is a really big ask. That's why you're all coming to this meeting today. So what do I mean, when I say that? And so we have some recommendations. We have a nice handout that we'd love to share with you. And so, I would recommend putting together a checklist for yourself, or maybe using ours as a starting point. But some really big, basics on that are going to be things like, making sure that if you have any, repetitive shots, to curate the very best from that, remove any image photos. And again, we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But one of the most important ones, I think, is to make sure that you're importing or bringing in any photos that the people that you love shared with you, because that's something that is kind of out of our control. We can set up Mylio to work on our phone and our computer so that it automatically grabs our photos for us. But when my sister shares, photos of all the cousins together, if I don't import those into my collection, then I don't really have those. And so that's going to be a line item, on almost all of our checklists, is making sure we're bringing in and importing our images that are shared with us, that are taken from other people. Any questions on that? I feel like that's a big one.
Yeah, Jordan, we did have a really good question in the chat. I know Angela kind of touched on it, but I know it's one of like the bigger questions that we get, which is, how do I start? And I know we're going to kind of go over tips and tricks of like, how do I maintain this? But the big question of Tom had asked, I have digital images on 2 computers, a laptop, bunch of external drives, countless flash drives, my phone. I don't know which has what. how do you start bringing them all together into one location? And I know that's like a big, scary question that a lot of people get stuck on, is like, how do I start? Not only we're talking about how to maintain, but how do I even start? How do I even get into this groove of things?
That is. So, I mean, I think that there are a variety maybe of different ways that you could approach that problem. I think that, I mean, we have a system, we call it the SurroundUs system, where we recommend you start with what we call consolidation. So bringing everything physically together in one location. And we typically recommend that be like an external hard drive. Um, someplace that you can literally go and pull, images from CDs, from old computers, and get them over to that device. Um, Once you get everything in one place, you want to preserve it as best as you can. So you want to set up like names so that it says like the orange lacy external hard drive, and then put all the pictures that you found underneath that hard drive, in that folder. Then what you can do after you consolidate is you can go and remove duplicates. And so there's kind of two different categories of duplicates. Exact duplicates, meaning it's the exact same file, and then near duplicate. So it might be a different type of file. It could be a high def and a low def, but otherwise the exact same, image. It could be a near duplicate, meaning like a series of shots. So you have to make some decisions, but you want to kind of curate the collection down. And then you want to get them, migrated into your system. With Mylio, you can do a lot of that duplicate work in Mylio itself. So sometimes it makes sense to move over a little earlier than if you were working with another system like Apple Photos or, Google Photos or Amazon or something. And then you start organizing within the system itself. And so we have some other series where we go into detail, on those topics. And I think that's something, Angela and Hannah and I have been talking about. So we might potentially run some of those here, but we certainly have some other resources. And so maybe Hannah, if you want to, put in some information, some resources on kind of more support for actually like the consolidation and, that the whole entire, like the whole shebang, this is kind of more like keeping clutter out, and why that's important. So I don't want to mislead you, because I don't think we're kind of just scratching that surface during today's call. All right. So tip number 2 is going to be keep only the best. So the best 1, 2 max. I mean, this is, there's a couple settings on these tricky little phones. One of which is literally where you accidentally or purposely hold your finger down on your iPhone and you get this like wonderful series of shots. My kids in particular think this is really, really funny. And then I'm literally left with sometimes 100 in a series of shots. Other times, you just have a big group and you're wanting to take a whole slew of them, because again, we don't have to worry about film anymore. And we can just go in and take a bunch and then go back later. The intention, I should say, is to go back later and pick out the very best one. The problem is that we don't ever actually go back there and do that, or very few of us do. So I think that avoiding taking bursts, unless that's what that's called when you take like the series of shots, they're called bursts. I think that avoid those. There's certain times where it is really nice, like if you're trying to catch an action shot or you have a big group. But then make sure that you've got that checklist, and dealing with your bursts is one of the line items, because that will chalk those counts up and those duplicates up like nothing else will. All right, so this is my favorite trick and tip that I've come across in software in the last like 5 years, probably, maybe longer than that, because it has impacted me so much. So the great thing about our phones and technology is that it's super convenient, right? Like I said, I've said many times, I have young kids, they're twins. So I feel like that makes it a little extra crazy sometimes. And my mind is not always like, I'm pulled in two different directions all the time. And so I have a really hard time like remembering where I parked sometimes, like especially at airports or big areas, or when birthdays or holidays come up, I'm trying to remember like, what did this twin want that this twin didn't want? And so it's so nice having your phone with you, because you can take all these pictures to remember all of this stuff, right? Yeah, it's great. But then what happens is my camera roll is full of a bunch of stuff that is not photos and it's not memories. And I realistically don't really need them. Other things like I like to take pictures of is, so I have a daughter, and I get really, I feel bad because I feel like the only hairstyle that I know how to put in her hair is a braid, and that she's going to like look back on her life and her whole life is going to be like her in a braid. And so I try and take pictures of like hairstyles that I think I could actually do that is not a braid, to like break it up for her. All of these crazy mom things that I do. And so I'm not alone. I've seen many people's, phones, and I know that we all do these things. There's all these things that we take pictures of because it's so convenient. And I am not willing to give up that convenience. I need it. I like that tool in my life, but I want it very separate from my photos, because it's not a photo. It is a photo, but it's not like a memory, to be clear. So this next tip is a way for you to have, your cake and eat it too. So you get to take the pictures using your notes application on your phone, and you can use Google Keep if you're an Android user. But the notes app that comes standard with your iPhone does this natively, and Google Keep works really similarly, which is an app that you can download on your Android. And so what you can do is you can organize and take pictures within that application. And when you do that, the magic thing is that it never goes and hits your camera roll. It's amazing. It takes some getting used to. It definitely is like a change in behavior I've noticed more than anything, just like, oh, I need to use my notes app, not this. So I'm going to walk you through exactly how to do that. If you guys want to follow along, pull your phones out. We'll do Apple phones first. And Raven, I might actually have you, if you don't mind, walk everybody through the how-to for the phones. That would be great. We've got the slides up here, so bring those out. I can hop on, and then we can kind of go through this, answer any questions. And like I was saying, though, this takes habit to change. So you can also go back and find photos. Like if you find, something like maybe something you were thinking about buying or something, you can move them over to your Notes app and purge them from your photo library as well. So it's one of my very favorites. Let's get into the Apple piece first.
I was on mute. All right, awesome. That's good. So I have my phone up. I use this all the time, by the way. I will definitely share how I use it for most of it. As we've kind of talked about, I use this for whenever I'm going to like buy picture frames for pictures. I'll take a picture of the picture I'm trying to buy the frame for, and then I'll write on the picture in the Notes app the measurements for that picture. And so I don't have to like take it with me or anything like that. I don't have to worry about it getting like wet from my Starbucks cup that I'm also kind of fumbling around with me while I'm shopping for that. But the biggest thing that I use this for is when I'm out and about shopping, or if I'm just online or something, and I see something that's going to make a really good Christmas gift for someone. I have a thing in my Notes app that says like Christmas list. And under each person's name, I add different photos of things that I find throughout the year. So then when it gets to Christmas or birthdays, I just have to bring up my Notes app, and it doesn't matter if I already have something there. If I see something, I just take a picture of it, and then it doesn't show up in my camera roll. So they don't see it if I'm going through my cameras. It stays separate, and it's great. All right, so we're first going to kind of go over just enabling notes in iCloud. The first thing that we want to do is we want to go ahead and click on the settings button. If you don't know what that is, again, this is for iPhone users. Android users, you'll be next, I promise. But also just keep an eye out on this if you're an Android user, because maybe you'll one up your friends that are iPhone users since you know these cool tips and tricks. But the settings button looks like a gear icon. And if you click on that, it'll kind of look, oh, it's going to blur it out. Okay. My blurred out background is working against me, but it'll just say settings on it. And if we go to the name at the top, if you don't see your name at the top, that means you're not signed into iCloud, which you really need to do. But if you do see your name at the top, you should be able to click. It should say your Apple ID. And then if we go ahead and click on iCloud under that little Apple ID menu, then we'll be able to kind of look around. There's a lot of differences. I can see that there's some updates. So right now I just updated to the new iOS, and it's not letting me scroll all the way down. So I have to click on show all for the apps using iCloud. So if you don't see the Notes app, you might have to click on that button, but then you can see that it says something like Photos, iCloud Drive, Passwords, and Keychain. And it should say Notes, the little notepad that has yellow with the lines. Click on that and tell it to sync to this phone. That'll sync all of your notes that are on your computer or any other Mac device you use to your phone. Alrighty, so now if we want to create a new note, we're going to get out of settings. You can usually do that by swiping up on the screen, or if you have the home button still, you can click on that home button. We want to find our Notes app. If you're having a hard time finding anything on your iPhone, you can always just kind of pull down on the screen where it brings up this little search thing. And if you type in Notes, it'll bring up your Notes app. If you're like my mom and you know exactly where all of your apps are, unlike me, where they're just all kind of hodgepodge throughout multiple screens and I never know where they are, then just navigate over to that Notes app. Once you're in the Notes app, you may have a lot of notes, you may have nothing. Down at the bottom right, you should see a little square with like a pencil sticking in it. This might be somewhere else on the screen, but it should be in one of the four corners. If we go ahead and click that, it should open up a brand new note. You can also create folders if you want, but we'll just kind of go in through creating that separate note. So let's go ahead and see. So we can just start typing and that'll create a note. So let's say maybe we want to remember this slideshow slide. We can go ahead and say cool surround us trick on our note, and I'm going to press enter. And then at the bottom, there's a couple of options. There's a little table that has you're able to make tables that just kind of have columns to them. You can edit your text, create checklists, add the little markup, which gives you a little marker. But then if you see the camera, you can click on the camera and you can either choose to add a photo or video from your library, you can scan a document, which is super nice. I did that for my COVID card, so I have my vaccine card with me all the time. But another thing you can do is you can take a photo or video. So if we say take a photo or video, I'm going to take a photo of all of you beautiful people. There it is. I'm going to say use that photo. Now it's in my notes app. If I go to my photo app, here's the magic part. It's not in my photos app. It's just in my notes app. So that's the magic of that, where it keeps that completely separated. Another cool thing that you can do with this on the little camera feature is if you click the camera, there's the scan text option. I use that all the time for Wi-Fi passwords. If you are at like a coffee shop and they have a crazy Wi-Fi password, or even if you're just looking at your own router, you can choose scan text and you can scan that, so you don't have to write in that long chain of letters or numbers. You can just scan the text, copy it, and you can paste it into your little Wi-Fi thing for the password. So the scan text, chef's kiss, love that all the time, would use that 10 out of 10. All right, so then for labeling, let's go ahead and if we go down to the bottom right, I think actually it's up at the top now for create a new folder. Nope, that's not working. Oh, there we go, folders. I wasn't in the folders. So if we kind of go back, so I'm in my iCloud folder, and that's showing me, let's see if I can undo that. So that's showing me all of the notes that are in that folder. I'm not as organized as Jordan is in these screenshots. I don't have a lot of folders, but now's a great time to make them. If we go back at the top left, it'll say folders. We can go back and you should see probably many folders, unlike me that just has one chaotic folder. But at the bottom left, there's a little plus sign on the folder. That'll create a new folder. There are options to create smart folders. I don't think we'll be able to get into that today, but for this time, I can go ahead and say new folder, and I'll just say photo organizing tips. And now I say enter, I say done. Now it's showed up for me. Hopefully it's shown up for you guys too. And now anything that I add as a new note there should show up in that folder. And that's the whole shabam, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you guys all followed along. I know that that was a lot of information, so please feel free to unmute if you have any questions really quick before we move on to our lovely Android users.
I just want to say thank you. Those are some great tips. And I never really thought of using the Notes app that way. I use it for a lot of other things, but never thought to do it for things like the Christmas presents. That's brilliant.
That is my favorite, because I always I'll take pictures of like Christmas presents and I'll take screenshots and stuff, but they just get lost in my photos.
Absolutely.
So then I can never find them. And so then I have to make an album and then I forget like who it was for each person. And so I started using that this year. And so my friends are going to get some awesome fire Christmas presents this year because I just really remember all of the things. So that's my favorite way to use it. I know my dad uses it for when he is gardening. He takes pictures of all of his pots and he writes the little the measurement. So he'll write, oh, this is an 8-inch pot on all the pictures, and he tries to color coordinate the plants to the pots because my mom really likes that. So gents, you can up your gardening game for this season. But yeah, the options are endless, and I haven't even really explored all of the things that you can do with it. I know I'm just scratching the surface.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it is great. And we did have a comment from Howard just saying that he also is a fan, collecting shopping pics. And I think that one is so valuable. But he does also bring up that, this does require family members to learn a new tool. And I know that with my parents, that's sometimes, that is something to consider. And so I think that it is, like I said, it's a new habit. We do have some recordings of this that are a little slower paced, not so live, that, may be helpful if you are working with, if you have somebody in your family that just needs some additional support, That's what we're here for. So, we'd love to help be of service in those areas. But I think it's more about finding the right tool for the job, and people have been using the Photos app for everything. And I think what we're arguing, here is that the Photos app, if we can really keep it for photos, it can have a lot more power. And there's some of these other things, but it does take time. So please, be patient, as you guys try some of this stuff out, and reach out to us. We're here to help if you have questions, like Raven said. All right, should we move to Androids users and Google Keep? Raven, you want to do this one too, and then I'll switch back to tip 4. Sorry.
I was so excited to learn. Yeah, of course. Okay, everybody will have to bear with me a little bit more. I don't have an Android phone right next to me to kind of walk through this, but we'll all get through this together, I promise. Alrighty, so very similar to Apple. The nice thing with all of these apps between Apple and Android is that most of the symbols are pretty much the same, or they're pretty intuitive. So even if you know one system, walking over to the other is pretty seamless usually. So if you go ahead and open up your Google Keep app, and then there's the nice thing about Google, they really have nice symbols, unlike that little Apple symbol where it's the little note with the pencil. This is just a plus. You can just add something or you can't add something. Those are the 2 options in Google. So you can go ahead down to the bottom right where that little plus sign shows. And if you click on that, then it should go ahead and pop up a new little note. And then if you go ahead, you can add that title directly to the note, just kind of similar to how we did with the iPhone. And then there's a little plus sign in the black box at the bottom left of your screen to add a photo. So let me kind of see where, yep, there's a little photo icon right there. So what we can do is we go ahead and select the little photo icon. You can, I'm sure that it probably says the same options of if you want to add it from Google Photos, or if you just want to add it as taking a new photo. What we want to do is we want to go ahead and take a new photo. Go ahead and do that again. Of course, take a picture of this lovely information on the screen so you have it forever. And then you can just go ahead and apply a label by clicking those 3 vertical dots on the bottom right. The 3 vertical dots with Google is a great thing, great little symbol to recognize with Google, and that's going to be something that shows like extra settings in any Google application or software. Those are really good, where if you really know Google pretty well and you're pretty comfortable searching out, always, like, wherever you see those 3 dots, just click on them, because you might see something that's a little bit hidden as a tool that is really useful. There's a couple of things in Google Photos and Google Drive where those like little dots, we found out recently that you can add labels to files in your Google Drive by clicking on those 3 dots. And none of us knew that you could add labels, because they update that all the time and they'll add new things all the time. So click on the 3 dots, be a little Indiana Jones explorer and click on those 3 dots. So another tip with that is that we can go ahead and Google's really great with adding color coding options, unlike Apple, which doesn't really like the color coding options. But so you can always go ahead and kind of add those notes. These kind of remind me of like the sticky notes of the day, where you just like have like your orange sticky notes for your shopping list and like your blue sticky notes for your to-do list items. It's kind of similar with the Google Notes app. So you can either have a very systematic way of organizing these colors, or you can just have whatever color you feel like at that point, which may be the better version, just for, whatever makes your brain happy. Of course, with Apple, again, you can always select a photo from your camera roll. If, let's say, you took a photo while you were out and maybe you forgot how to do this and you wanted to look it up, you can always add a photo from your photo roll, and then you can go ahead and you can delete it from your camera roll, and it'll still stay safe in your Notes app, but be deleted from your camera roll. So that's another option that you can do. Just add a couple of little extra steps there. To go ahead and add more labels to help keep you organized, again, we're going to go ahead and look in that Google Keep app. And my favorite, the 3 horizontal lines, not the dots, the lines, the little hamburger helper at the side there. And that's going to be at the top left of your screen. If you don't see it at the top left, remember that all of these symbols can kind of move around the screen depending on how updated your app is. And typically, if you can't find it where we're saying that is, you may have an older version or you may have the newest version, and it might just be in one of the other corners. And then we can go ahead and select add or edit any labels, and then you can add a label. So this is kind of similar with the color coordination of maybe you forget what colors you have for color coordination. If you're like me and you often forget that and you're like, well, was purple for Tuesday to-do list or was that for my shopping list for Saturday? You can always add that label instead, so that there's no way to get any of those mixed up, and everybody will be envious of your organization. All right. I know that one was a little bit more rootin' tootin' cowboy there.
That was great. And I think, on that note, you guys, Google Keep and Apple's Notes app aren't the only 2 options out there. So if either of these did not feel right to you, there's a variety of other notes applications available that should pair with your device. And so I think it's just, looking at one of those. So check out, play around with it, see which one, fits you and your personality well. So we've got 2 more tips in our presentation. This one I've already touched on a little bit, but it's the importance of importing or bringing in emailed or photos that your people texted you or sent you in some way, right? I think mostly people are sharing with us in a couple of different ways. There's social media, which is one way. But if people are sending us something directly, they're probably either sending it in an email or sending it in a text. And so just because it's sitting on a text message on your phone does not mean that you actually have brought that into your collection. And so you want to go in and import those. And that's just a fancy word for bringing them, into your collection so that it becomes like a copy in your collection. So, so depending on what device you have, depends on how you go about doing that. Typically, I would say that if you just kind of hold down on the photo, you can usually, prompt a command that will import it in. That's just kind of a general rule. It doesn't work on all devices, but it works on the majority of them. It's typically kind of where I would recommend that you start. But you can also, reach out to us if you're having problems with your specific device and say, hey, I can't get this to be brought in. But it's certainly very important, especially for the ones that are the photos that you really, really love. Typically, people aren't sharing the garbage photos with you; they're sharing the best stuff. So they are, the photos that you probably want. The other thing with social media photos, just this topic in general, I would just advise you to beware of the resolution of the photos. So both when you're sharing and when you're receiving photos, sometimes those might not be full size images. Those could be reduced images. Most images on social media are reduced in quality. And so if you're copying those out, you might not be, able to go then print those, for example. And this is just a bigger topic in general. I had a really sad situation that happened with this personally. When I was taking a bunch of pictures, this was probably about 8 years ago, I had a phone that had a energy setting on it that affected the resolution of the camera phone in non like in dark settings. And I took all of these pictures. It was actually when my kids were born. So like the first pictures of the kids. And luckily we had some from like a real camera, but a lot of them were from my phone. And I went to go print them, and the resolution was so bad on these that I couldn't print out like 4x6 copies of these photos, which is just, the little size. And so definitely just, pay attention to resolution, pay attention to, as part of your path forward, as you're receiving photos and videos from different sources, ask those questions. Are you able to share the full size image with me? And there's a software program called WeTransfer that can transfer larger files, for free. So there's a lot of different options out there. I see some chats going around. It looks like they got answered, but jump in if they didn't. So our last and final tip of the day is just managing your computer storage. So we're nearing the end of our time. Sometimes we'll do like a demo of just how to make sure your computer is backed up. But I don't think we have time for that today. So again, we'd love to have you guys, reach out and help you out with that, maybe on an individual basis. But you want to, pay attention to the capacity of your devices, your hardware devices, both your mobile as well as your computers, your desktops or your laptops, and make sure that you don't run out of storage on them, because that can affect all kinds of different, components of how you interact with your computer. It can certainly affect your productivity. It can affect your literal capacity to store more data. And you want to make sure that you have a backup. I think, here in Colorado, you guys were talking about Florida when we hopped on, California, like there are so many, weather related disasters, it seems like, anymore, right? Where we're, we had fires here that just ravaged Colorado over the last couple of years. And so making sure that you have a backup in place is so critically important. I feel like it's something we used to talk a lot about. And then with cloud, it kind of came out, and there's a lot of assumptions. People are like, oh, I'm attached to a cloud. Well, make sure you are, and that your cloud is truly redundant and it's backing up everything it needs to be. A lot of times, like for example, Apple's iCloud is a syncing tool. It's not a backup cloud. It's not a backup tool. And that's a really big misunderstanding. And so its purpose is not to back up all your data, but to sync it between your devices. Those are two very different purposes for software. And so if you're running, an all Apple environment, you need to have a backup in place. That's why Apple has their Time Machine backup, in addition to their Apple iCloud. So those are just, some things to consider and think of. You can also manage some of your computer storage by disabling certain features. So iPhone has something called Live Photos, which is basically just a pairing of both a still image and a video sequence. And so they can be large files. That's a setting that can be turned on and off. Certain Android phones have similar, settings and tools. So you might want to go through your select feature set on your device and just determine, what are the tools that you're really liking, disable the ones that you're not necessarily attracted to, because there can be like a very big kind of power capacity trade-off for having some of those tools enabled on some of our devices. And then I think just the other component of this is just, making sure that, you've got to really, circling back to the backup strategy. We tend to adopt, there's a variety of backup strategies out in the ether. There's what's called a 3-2-1 backup strategy, which combines both like a local and a cloud-based backup. And there's cloud only, there's redundant cloud where you have more than one cloud. And I think that they can all be safe in certain circumstances. Again, just please make sure that you're giving it some real focus and attention. And if you need the help of a professional to make sure that your data is safe, that you are reaching out and getting support on that. All right, so I think we're going to move in. That's all we're presenting. So we can take the last few minutes here for questions and comments. I just appreciate all of your time. I know it's a lot to spend an hour with someone you don't necessarily know. I hope you found our how-tos and tips and tricks helpful. We will also be sending out the link for that organizing checklist if you guys would like to download that. And then we also offer free 30-minute consultations. So if you'd ever like to meet with us one-on-one, we'd love to meet you. So thank you again, and I'll stop talking and we can go through any questions that anyone has.
Well, thank you so much, Jordan. That was an excellent presentation, and Raven for jumping in on the iOS and Android stuff. I also, on that note, I wanted to point out, you guys had me thinking now of different ways to get pictures straight into Mylio, as opposed to going to your camera roll and then having to clean up your camera roll because they're now in Mylio. So I was looking at a picture here that I got sent this morning. I'm not sure if you guys can see it. My mom sent it to me. And if I tap on that picture in my text message, down at the bottom left corner of my messages app here on my iPhone, there's a share button, and it brings up your system share. And if you just scroll over onto the right, Mylio Photos is right there. And so instead of saving it to my camera roll, I could save this picture directly to my Mylio and save that step of having to go and clean that up later. So if somebody's sending you text messages with pictures, let's say your cousin just had a baby and you want to save those photos, you can go ahead and download those straight to your Mylio, eliminate having them go to your camera roll and then to Mylio, and just save that time of cleaning things up. So something I thought of. Yeah. You guys have my mind spinning here. It's good stuff.
That's a great tip. I love that. Anything to save time, right?
Absolutely. So let's see, Robert says he was a little bit late, but thought it was great help. That's awesome. Robert, we did record, so I'll get the recording posted here within a couple of days to the community. So you'll be able to go back and check over things. And Hannah, if you want to email me that form, I'll go ahead and put that into the post when we post the recording so people can grab that there as well. That'd be awesome. Are there any other questions? Catherine says, how do I save directly to Mylio? So it depends on what app you're coming from. So what I was just showing was from the messages, the chat or the text message app for iPhone. If you tap on a photo and bring it up full screen and then tap it again, you'll get a few icons along the bottom of the screen. One is the share icon. And if you go into that menu, all you have to do is scroll over to the right and you'll have an icon there for the Mylio app, and that will send it directly to Mylio. There's a lot of other ways to do that, and you can do that from other apps, not just messages. But if you have specific questions, feel free to ask in the community and I will give more information on specific scenarios. Happy to do that. Any other questions? Please feel free. This is a great time. If you want to unmute and ask, you're welcome to do so, or just pop them into the chat. All right. Going once, going twice. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Jordan, this is fantastic. We really appreciate you coming and sharing your knowledge. Would love to have you back again to go more in depth on certain topics. I think the entire community would really appreciate it. Let's see here. Mark says, I found that when you send it to Mylio, like what was mentioned, you do have to open Mylio on the phone to finish the steps and getting it into the catalog. I think you do have to do that, but it typically defaults to the inbox folder and then you can move it wherever you need it to go. So it's up to you which way you want to go. So, all right. Well, again, thanks for being here. I hope you guys have a great day. Make sure you join us again for coffee break next week. We'll be talking with JC again for part 2 of traveling with Mylio. So he's going to be talking about using an SSD drive with your Mylio catalog, whether you're working from an iPad Pro or you're working from a laptop, how to keep everything safe and protected while you're traveling. So it'll be a great presentation for sure. And then the following week, I believe we're going to have Rich Harrington, and he's going to be talking about some new features coming to Mylio Photos in the near future. So you won't want to miss that one either. We'll be getting those all posted to the events section of the community. So keep an eye on that and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks again, Jordan and your team.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.